Hey everybody, welcome back to Therapists Unmasked. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Sam, and today we are joined with a fellow therapist, Joanna, who discusses her experience with grief and hardship as a therapist.
We hope you enjoy the episode, and let's roll the intro. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our first guest coming back. I'm really excited to have you on. Tell us your name, tell us where you're from, what you do for work, and what are your views on mental health?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Of course.
My name is Joanna. I am a licensed clinical social worker based out of Southern California. Since you're across the country, I don't know how much you know California. Closer to like LA area, Los Angeles, and a city called Monrovia. So I'm here because I love your content. I think our mental health is so important, and a lot of people think like, you're just going to talk to someone when they come to see us and stuff. And it's like, no, people are struggling with very valid things, and having someone and like to support them is like important, not like your friend and not your family member, because they only have like one side of you, right? So yeah, my views on mental health is just that it's really important, and I'm here to, support other people. And I think like my personal experiences have so much to do with why I'm here and why I'm doing what I'm doing. I recently started my private practice, so just a few months ago. So I feel like, I'm still like a work in progress and stuff. So that's where I'm at now. And this was after being away from the field for quite a bit. I was like not actively working like an agency or anything for about 5 years. So I went back with a group private practice, got my feet wet a little bit, and then now I'm doing my own thing and see where this takes me, everything else.
What made you decide to take some time off from working for 5 years and then deciding that you wanted to come back?
Of course, I ultimately it's my decision, but it was more of like I had to do it for my family. I had a daughter with a medical complexities and a rare genetic disorder, so she required like a lot of medical care.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, who best to take care of her than her mother? And so that's why I dedicated myself to like being her home caregiver for her whole life. She passed away in August of 2022. So it was like that was my main reason of like taking a step back. And I tell everyone, like, yeah, I wasn't practicing, but I was her 24/7 social worker, guys. Like this, I did this all the whole time, but it was like not really a choice. Like I had to do it for my family, for her. So
Wow, that's a lot. You had to take on a lot. And being a therapist while also grieving too is just, it's a lot of emotions all at once. And especially because you have to put your emotions aside to be able to help other people. And by the way, I want to applaud you for having your own private practice because that's something that I want to do too. So I'm working on trying to get my LPC right now, to have my own private practice. That's super admirable. I really do admire business owners, especially those with like small private practices and stuff, because I know it's a lot of work. I know it's going to be stressful, but I can't wait to get there myself. How are you when it comes to your grief? Like, how are you honoring your daughter in any way?
so well, let me like deflect a little and answer your comment on like the private practice. Like it is a lot of fun, and it is a learning curve for sure, because you're going to be a business owner, something that I feel like our schools are not teaching much about, how to do those other backends. So you will get there, and I'm here to support, reach out. I know it'll be totally different time zones and stuff, but even after she passed away, I took a little time, but it wasn't even that much. It was only a few months of like, hey, I need to get myself together in this headspace, because my work is not easy work. Whether I decided to do therapy because of my credentials, like I feel like I have so much opportunities of like where I want to go. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be. So because of that, it was like, okay, regardless where I go, it's going to be tough, right? When I first started, I really wanted to do like CPS, Child Protective Services and stuff. And I feel like I'm a total different person from when I first decided to be a social worker to where I am now, and like all of these personal experiences and like where life has taken me to. So it was like, okay, do I do that stuff? Do things that I am comfortable with, right? Because I do have experience working with foster youth and relative caregivers in that aspect of adoptions. I was an adoption social worker for some time. So it's like, I know that really well, but I go back to that. But to get my license hours, I did some mental health in community settings with younger children. Then when I decided, it was like, I know I want to go back to how do I honor my child, right? How do I keep giving back to her community that a lot of people don't really know about, and it's not talked about? Do I want to work with medically complex children? Do I want to work with families? Like, I have all these options. I want to go back to like the hospital that served her so many years, because it was like amazing to see that support from all the professionals there. But there was so much room for growth and improvement there. So it's like, I'm here. Walked this path. I should get back to them. And then there's this other piece of like, well, I'm licensed now too, and I could do, my own thing. So that was a little like scary too, just doing something totally different. And the opportunity came to, work with a group private practice. So I'm like, why not? The hours were like very flexible. It was like I get to decide when I want to work. And because I do have two other younger children, it's like I needed to do that while figuring out where I'm at in my mental health space, because I know I'm going to be grieving forever. So where am I now, right? How much time do I give myself? And, went back and did that for a little bit, ended up having my third child in between that. And then that's when I was like, I have a close friend who was like, you could do this. You could do your own private practice, because she had already started it a few years ago. So I had her to kind of like guide me through all that. And where I am now, working with clients again, like in this one-on-one setting, yes, the grief comes up a lot. And my thing is like, I love working with it. I love working with people with transitions, and the grief will come in different ways. So I understand where they are, because I've actually walked that path, and I haven't yet worked with someone who's lost a child, but I've worked with people who have lost parents, um, best friends that are on the verge of like losing someone. And it's like, I have this new lens, and I could say I completely understand where you are. And as much as I have like all these other tools too, right? Like I'm trauma informed, cognitive behavioral therapy, those are like, of course, very useful and important. But being there, like where someone else has been as well, like that's a different ballgame, I feel.
Being somebody who has a private practice, you are your own boss. You don't have anybody, a supervisor, somebody to go and ask. So how do you deal with the countertransference?
So, of course, I'm in therapy myself. A client the other day asked me, like, he was really struggling, and it's like crying. Are you in therapy, or have you felt this before? Like, yeah, we need to take care of ourselves too, right? To be able to help you. And I think like the people we work with are just like as a social thing, like people think that everyone should have it together, right? And then the truth is like not every like no one's going to have it together. Like if we think that we do, then you have some things coming your way, right? Because things are gonna happen. So I have my own therapist that I just started because my previous one having to take a break. She's doing her PsyD, and she's collecting hours of other sorts and doing another exam. She's like, I gotta go. So yeah, I'm doing my own therapy. And then I am signed up with a platform that does provide some consultation and stuff. And I do have like a group that I am able to like reach out to, like of old colleagues that are doing their private practices as well. And we get to just bounce off certain things, whether even if it's just like logistical things or own personal lives.
Hearing stories of our clients, they can bring us back to a time when we felt those emotions, and it can be really, really hard in terms of grief. I've lost grandparents, I've lost a friend, and it's hard because when you hear other clients and their raw emotions, crying it out, and you're brought back sometimes to the moment of how you felt in that same situation. Sometimes you also feel those emotions coming up. So the fact that you have a support system and you're able to discuss it with them and they're able to give you their advice, it's really great because at the end of the day, we're not alone, which is something we also have to remind ourselves sometimes that even though we're therapists, we have other people who have been in the same situation.
I've lost my mom, and I lost her when just right when I was getting my counseling license. And my world turned upside down after that. And since then, when I hear somebody who lost their parent or, friend, whatever, countertransference definitely comes up for me. And sometimes my clients say, like, oh, nobody understands, like they don't get it, they don't understand what it's like to lose a parent. My husband doesn't understand me, like I try to tell them, and they think that I'm just complaining all the time. And honestly, I'll tell them, like, I know what it's like to lose a parent, and it's hard. It's hard. And when I tell them that, they're like, oh my God, like, thank God you understand, and I think those are the times when it's like okay to disclose things, right? Because so they know that you're human too. And I wonder if you do the same thing.
I hear what you're saying, like where that they're having these like big emotions, they're telling you about like how much this wave of grief came about. And it's like, I've been there, right? And I've been able to disclose like I've lost a significant person. I haven't went to the extent of like I lost my daughter. And I think part of it is like I'm trying to protect my clients because they're gonna be like, oh crap, that's like huge, right? Like everyone always says that's the club no one wants to be part of. But yes, I do disclose like I've experienced grief from a significant person and I've been there. And when they hear me talk about like, the waves and not feeling understood and like especially when it happened and like you feel like you lost yourself, like who am I now? Because they are part of your identity. They are just like, oh wow, like yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
How you mentioned earlier in the podcast that our experiences, they ultimately define the road that we ended up taking. But I'm wondering, how did you start in your field and end up with the group that you work with today? Is it still the same group that you thought you'd be working with when you first started off, or is this a complete 180 from where you ever thought you would be?
It's a complete turn. And like I mentioned earlier, like who I am, when I first started and what I wanted to do is totally different than where I am now. I remember like having conversations right after like graduating with my MSW with coworkers and stuff. And I knew I wanted to get my license because it was like more opportunity, but I didn't think I would be a therapist. I didn't think I'd be in mental health at all. I thought I was going to be doing more like case management or like working with people in like a medical setting and things like that. So the medical setting piece, like that's still a goal that I have, especially more so now, like having had that experience. But yeah, it is totally different. And then come this grief piece, like you don't think you're gonna lose someone like that so traumatically and abrupt. And although she had like medical complexities and we knew that, that things could go really bad, there's always that piece of like hope that a miracle would happen. And I talk to this to clients as well, right? Like coming to terms with that, like the reality of things. So yeah, I didn't expect to be working with people with grief and transitions and like connecting so well. And they're not the only people I work with. I work with women as well. And I think the other piece, like I've always wanted to work with like the Latinx community, like because I identify with that culture. So that has been consistent all the way through. And even now, like I could still say like I will continue working with them in different ways. And yeah.
Where's your family
Okay.
from?
From Mexico.
I love that. My family is half Mexican, half Uruguayan. What part of Mexico?
My dad is from Michoacan, and then my
Hmm.
mom was born here, and her family is from Jalisco and Zacatecas.
Oh, I love that. My dad was born in Tijuana, but my family is from Jalisco. So have you gotten the opportunity to work with the Latinx community? And actually, before I even go into that, we had a whole debate at work of the term Latinx. And since you brought it up, I kind of want to ask you. I don't know how well this is going to go, but what do you think of the term Latinx? Because I know a lot of older people in the Hispanic community, they don't appreciate the term because it's Latino or Latina. So they're like, it shouldn't be that way. So it's been a debate for a very long time. So I kind of want to get your view on it.
That's a tough question too, because all of this also came about when I was not actively working, right? A lot of
Uh-huh.
this happening when I was like taking care of my daughter. And I feel like even now I have a lot of learning to do when it comes to a lot of it. I appreciate the term because I like that everyone is feeling seen,
Mhm.
hopefully, and they're able to identify. Yeah, I also have a lot of experience with the LGBTQ community,
Mhm.
and um, and that's where that comes from.
Being in a Hispanic culture, right? Growing up in that, I know that I've had family members that just didn't understand mental health. And, like if you're seeing a therapist, you're crazy. And I'm wondering if you've experienced have had ex similar experience with that.
Oh yes, definitely. We some of my cousins that are more progressive and like this culture, we laugh and we're like, yeah, they like to say los nervios, which is like they're just like, having this little episode of being anxious and stuff. But in Spanish, like that's not acknowledging it, right? And it's
Mhm.
asking that they are struggling with mental health. So there's always been so much avoidance, especially like in my community with my family. And I noticed that. So there's so much stigma. And that's the other part of like, as I've grown to where I am professionally in my career, I try to call people out on these things, in my family circle and things like that. And even up to recently, I feel like my mom didn't really acknowledge like what I was actually doing and like realizing like, wait, my daughter actually has these tools and resources. It wasn't just like she's just telling me, right? Because she wants to tell me something. Like this was more of like, oh wait, no, she went to school for this and
She's not saying it just for shits and giggles.
yes, yes.
I've talked to clients, parents who, ultimately I have to give them some psychoeducation on depression. And sometimes when I call the mom or the dad, they'll say, "Oh, está bien, solo está un poco triste." I'm like, no está un poco triste. Like, that's, they're going through depression. Like, and I have to educate them and, let them know this is this, this is that, this is that. And as much as you, I also see myself correcting my own family, which may or may not bring up a few altercations every now and then. But I mean, we're in this field for a reason.
Yeah,
And so if we're not going to do it, who is?
right.
I really do believe that a lot of us are in the field because we've been through something that made us want to be like, you know what? I never want anybody else to feel the same way. And I'm wondering if there was something that you went through that made you want to be in this field.
I think the like where I grew up, definitely seeing like how a lot of people and a lot of peers like my age at that time didn't have like support like my parents gave me. And my parents aren't perfect either. I mean, and that's another piece too of like maybe even my parents not understanding me where I was and what I was going through. And I grew up with a father from Mexico, and there was so much of those like back in the day values and beliefs and some machismo there and stuff. And my dad's come a long way, thankfully. But there was even alcoholism and things like that. So I could say like I relate to a lot of people in the Latinx culture that have experienced these things of, not feeling heard, not being able to connect with their parents emotionally, and especially growing up, right? In that time where you need them most. And these things I learned later on in life, while I was doing all this education, it was like I started connecting the dots and whatnot. But one was like, growing up in a home, maybe not feeling heard, and then seeing around my community, that there was so much potential with kids. They were really smart, and I felt like they are so much smarter than me. How are they not like doing this? How are they not furthering their education? And I looked back and it all came down to like the home. And I go back to my parents, and I know that it was like learning, but I always appreciate that no matter what, they were providing for me and supporting me. It was in their own kind of way of support, but that's how I felt like, people need more opportunities and people who understand them.
My family has definitely come a long way too when it comes to mental health, right? Because I remember the first time I went to therapy and my parents were questioning where are you going? Like what's happening? And I'm like, oh, like I'm going to a doctor's appointment, but then they just kept digging and digging and digging and I'm like, all right, like I'm going to therapy. And they both looked at each other like, why? You have a roof over your head. Why do you need to go? And since then, my dad is definitely a lot more understanding when it comes to the mental health and he knows I struggle with depression and I think he learns a lot about me watching this because I don't actively just go like, "Hey dad, I'm depressed," or like, have these kind of conversations. So I think that he learns a lot about me watching this because I'm very open with anybody about it, but I've never been able to, again, like to just be like, hey, this is what I'm going through right now. But he's been more understanding about it, which I'm super grateful for. And I stopped going to therapy for years, but then I went back after my mom passed away. And I told my dad, like, hey dad, like I'm sorry, but I'm really struggling right now. I'm going back to therapy. And he didn't even question it. He didn't even say anything. He was just like, okay, like do what you need to do for your mental health. Like that's totally okay.
Mhm.
You
I
know.
can confirm that her dad watches our podcast because one day when we were filming, we finished filming and we were just talking instead, but all of a sudden we hear our voices from the TV and we're just like, what? And we go and he's watching our latest episode. We're just like, we just okay. He's so cute. It's sweet.
It's been a journey with my family. It's for them to understand, but I think they're work in progress, and that's okay. The fact that they're trying to understand where I'm coming from and what I'm feeling, like that still means everything. And
Listen,
because
work in progress is better than no progress.
absolutely, because I remember when I first told them about me going to therapy, like I felt incredibly invalidated, and now to be at a place where he's just like, okay, like do what you need to do. Like that makes me feel so good.
Yeah, that you have that support from them, like because in the beginning they could be like, but why? Like I'm here and what did I do? And it's really harsh reality that it's like a lot of the mental health does end up coming from like stemming from our childhood. And they are just like, what did I do? You know, how did this happen? And then I identify too when clients, you know, their things are growing up in your childhood with our culture. It's like there is no confrontation. There is no resolution and trying to find solutions. It's more of like throwing everything under the rug. And that was kind of like what it was like for us, for me, right? And now having to find different tools of like, no, this needs to be addressed. This is important. You know, how do we do this? And even now, like some family members, it's just like, did she just say that? Like, really? And it was like, and it's like, no, it had to be said, right? To move forward.
My family definitely throws things under the rug, for sure. But having those conversations can be uncomfortable, though. Let's be real, right? And nowadays, I do have more conversations with my dad that I probably would have never had like before my mom passed away. Because my mom was my best friend. I always talked to her about everything. I always talked about my emotions and whatever it was that I was going through. So, and my dad was just always in the background, just listening to everything, being a cheese muscle, you know. But but you know, now that I actually have to talk to him about these things and have these real conversations with him that I probably wouldn't have before, it definitely feels good. It definitely feels good. It feels liberating. It feels like, you know, I obviously can confide in him, and I obviously talking to him about these things is not as bad as I ever thought it would be. Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I feel like I had like one big experience like that, like turning point for my dad and I, because we did have a really rough relationship growing up and not feeling supported and, you know, like the controlling piece from like his culture. And at one point, now as an adult, this was several years ago, but as an adult, you know, was that confrontation of like, hey, what you did really hurt me. I felt, you know, you preached, you know, doing the right thing so much, and I felt like that wasn't the right thing, and it was like it's totally uncomfortable. Like I had never done that before. Like I had to stand up for myself to my dad, and it was like ever since then, like that totally changed our relationship. And sometimes I talk to clients about this too. You know, if you really want to grow your relationship, you have to have these uncomfortable conversations. And that's where what I found myself doing, you know, with him. And since
Yeah.
our relationship was totally a turning point, and I'm able to, he doesn't live here anymore. He lives in Georgia on your end. But I'm able to, like, when I'm really struggling, be able to call him and like get some reassurance of like what I'm doing is, you know,
Mhm.
and because he knows me well. And even though there was a lot of like that missing communication or those missing pieces growing up, I feel like he was able to see, and he tells me all the time, like, you know, I see how you have put yourself out there and really worked hard to where you are, and like being emotionally trying to be emotionally healthy for, you know, an understanding of what you're going through and the world and things like that. So just having him say those things to me, that growing up, he would tell his coworkers, like I'd go visit him at work and, oh my goodness, your dad says so much great things about you. And it was like, well, why doesn't he tell me that? Like, why do I have to hear it from you? And now there's been a total shift. Like he's able to tell me these things.
With me and my conversations with my dad, it's more about like my mental health in general and just how I've been feeling and what I'm struggling with for the day, or if it's like boy trouble, or which was so uncomfortable at first because I was so used to having these conversations with my mom. Just hearing you guys talk about like, hey, like I talked to my parent about, you know, how they made me feel during this time, honestly is very encouraging for me because I haven't had that conversation yet because I'm just an anxious person. So like I overthink situations. Sam is smiling because she knows it. And so
We were
it's
having this
just
conversation last night.
so you know, it's definitely nerve-wracking to have those conversations, right? Because you don't know how it's gonna, you know, affect the
Like,
relationship or how they're going to react. So I'm not gonna lie, I still have yet to have that kind of specific conversation, and it is scary. And I applaud the both of you for being able to have those conversations with your parent.
Yeah, I feel like you get some sense of like liberation of being able to kind of just move forward and like I mentioned earlier, just grow your relationship and continue to have those conversations when they are needed. It wasn't easy at all. And it was like at a time where it was like, okay, this is just really hurtful now, right? And I can't keep it in.
The hardest part for me was or is the fact that my family is just known for throwing things under the rug. So I think that's why it's still hard for me to have that specific kind of conversation, just because we that's just all we know. Is just throwing it under the rug, you know. We go through the thing and then once it's all over, yeah, like that's it. We like, you know, and I think that's why it's still hard for me to have that kind of conversation. Although I know it would be healing for me, I know that it would be nice to get that out because I think that you know, when you bottle things in, right, you feel all these emotions and like the maybe some resentments there and it's hard. It definitely is hard to have that kind of conversation, but hearing you both talk about it is super encouraging to me.
No, and I like saying, where, it's easier to just do this, right? And just avoid it. And even like my mom is like my safe space. Like I love her. I'm so grateful for her and everything. And Ashley, I'm sorry about your loss. Like I really am. And even more so as she gets older, I am so scared of losing her, because she is my safe space. And I know I don't tell her enough. So talking to you, it's like I needed, and when I talk to people sometimes, like it's just like I need to tell her more often. But I'm so comfortable with her sometimes, and it's just like I'm constantly like, we need to do this and we need to do that, and like more of like these logistical things, or even like with her, I'm more like blunt with her, I guess you could say. And sometimes she'll take it more of like offensive or like, did you like that's rude or things like that. And that's where it's a whole different spectrum with her, where I'm able to just say it out loud with her because she is my safe space.
I think there's nothing like a mother's love, right? And Joanna, I love that you said like this is encouraging me to tell my mom I love her more. And I try to encourage that to anybody, my friends, and anybody, because you know, you really never know when's the last time you're gonna see them. When she passed away, before she passed away, sorry, she was in the hospital for a week. And I could not go to see her because she was just in awful conditions physically. And I just couldn't bring myself to see her in that way because it was just incredibly heartbreaking. So I really struggled with the idea of like, I didn't get to see her and I didn't get to tell her anything for the last time. In that week, I had three people tell me, Ashley, go see her. Go say your last words to her in case something happens to her. Tell her you love her. Tell her that you're sorry for whatever you've ever done to her. And like they would tell me this, and I'd be like, okay, okay, okay. But I would still push it off because I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I struggled with that. But then, you know, as time has gone on, I'm like, you know what? I was a good daughter to her. Like I always had her back. I always was with her. Oh my God, when I tell you that I was like attached to my mom, I was attached to my mom. And like even if me and her were fighting and me and her had some pretty bad fights. And even then I would still be attached to her either way, even if I was annoying her or whatever, right? But you know, I really do encourage who even people watching this too, tell your parents that you love them because you will never know. You never know what happens, right? And I dread the day that something happens to my dad, God forbid. Years ago, he had cancer. And since then, he's like, you never know, maybe the cancer's gonna come back or like something's gonna happen to me. And I'm like, Dad, stop it, you know? Because I really dread the day that God forbid something happens to him because there is nothing more traumatic, or at least in my experience, nothing more traumatic than seeing your parent dead in a hospital bed, dead in a casket. It's awful.
And I know, like, I tell myself, like, I know more than anyone, like, life is short. Like, you cannot just, like, yes, count your blessings, but you can't rely, like, on another day. Like, you really can't. My love for my daughter was just like, and earlier in the podcast, you asked, like, how do you honor her, right? And for me, it was like, I'm constantly doing things in her memory, in her honor. I'm putting her name out there and I'm saying, like, I'm doing this for her, whether it's just to go decorate like her gravesite.
Oh.
Christmas, like I'm trying to make it a tradition to give a gift in her honor. Like just
Mm.
a lot of little things like that. And I hear you saying like it was hard for me to even not be mad at myself that I wasn't able to be there with her at the hospital because that's hard. Like my daughter died in my arms here at home, like, but we chose to do that. But I remember there were certain people that maybe weren't able to be here. And I was saying to myself and to other people, like, oh, I hope they don't regret it or things like that. And it was like, no, that's their journey. That was their journey. Like, there's a reason why they want to have it that way. And honoring everyone's way of doing those things. Going back and talking about my mom, like, my mom lost her parents at a really young age. Her dad, she was 15 years old, and her mom, she was 18 years, like right out of high school. So she's endured so much loss, and she tells me this all of the time, like both my parents and now my first grandbaby. And it's like, yeah, you've went through so much, and she knows she's strong, and I tell her, everyone tells her, but I'm afraid that she doesn't feel it as like much as we would all like for her to. But yeah, like you said, like I need to make it more of an intent to show her that because it's so important because and I know that that's, we all have our love languages.
Mhm.
For her would be those words and those acts of service and things like that. So
I love that you said that you decorate your daughter's grave. And we also do that for my mom too, like for Valentine's Day, Christmas, like all those things. We decorate her tombstone too. She's buried with her parents. So, we make sure that we make sure it looks nice the way she would want it to be because she loved decorating the house. She loved it. So we make sure that we decorate the tombstone in the way that she would love for it to be decorated.
Same for my grandpa in Los Angeles. My aunt is constantly sending us videos like on Christmas they put like a little Christmas tree. For Easter they go and they decorate it too. And it's always nice, for his birthday they have like mariachi music. It's really sweet like seeing what is done.
Now, you obviously deal with a lot. Like you have kids, you have your private practice going on. What are you doing for self-care?
that's we preach it so much.
We do.
You have to do this. And what are you doing? And we're like coming up with coping tools or coping toolbox, right? And it's just like, what the heck is mine? But for real, like I recently started journaling and I'm not like trying to do it like every single day because I don't want to be so hard on myself. But I recently started doing that, and that's really nice. I keep preaching that. I don't know if you all have iPhones, but they have like a new app on a journal app, and I love
Oh,
it. I love the suggestions, and I go off of that, whether it's pictures, podcasts, music, whatever, and I like to just like write on about that. I love listening to music. I feel like if someone knows me very well, they know that I'll be in a mood if I'm listening to music. And a lot of socializing with friends. I learned with one of my therapists that I get energy from like being around people. So I really enjoy doing that. And then just being present with my kids. I used to do that with my eldest daughter. Like because our days were so overwhelming, constant doing something to meet her like medical needs. And it was hard to like literally just sit down. And sometimes like I'd just be so overwhelmed. So I'd just go grab her, carry her, and like hold her. And like that was just so healing and soothing for me. And now, like with my other kids that have different abilities, I'm just like, trying to honor that for them too, right? Like I can play with you in this different way and just being present, just reminding myself to like, I'm here right now. I have control over this only. Just like I tell my clients, like, how can you be more present?
How old are your kids?
They're my 3-year-old
Mhm.
and my 6-month old. She'll be 7 months next week. Didn't meet her, which is a struggle I will forever have, which is something I came to terms with my therapist too, right? That I'm never gonna have my 3 kids together, and that's hard. So when she never met her, and my 2-year-old, he's 2.5, I mean 3.5, he has very sporadic memories now. Like in the beginning, everything was so fresh for him.
Mhm.
And he would talk about her more and talk more about like, can I play with her and things like that, even though she wouldn't physically be able to play, but he'd go to her bed and just like make her dance supposedly or bring her toys, help me with things. And like those things are phasing out a little bit, but because there's pictures of her everywhere, her toys are
Mhm.
still around because they're little, they get to play with them now too. Uh,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, this was Valentina's, right? And this and that. And it's like, yeah, I miss her and things like that. So I feel like he also has this specific instinct with like other kids that are around that age and just being more caring, especially with like girls. And so, yeah, that's that aspect with him.
Going back to earlier when you said that you like to surround yourself with friends and that you do well just being around other people. I do too. I can
Oh, me
absolutely
too.
relate to that. Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that because especially when I'm just feeling depressed, I'll FaceTime a friend and they can just keep me company, even if it's us just not even talking like that. It just their company makes me happy. I'm in my thoughts too much. I am like alone. I'm in my thoughts too much. So it's just like I need somebody there to just, keep me happy, make me laugh. It's really not that hard to make me laugh. So, just having that company there is really, really, really refreshing, especially when you're feeling down.
And I think that's where like that whole being present comes into play, right? Because if we're so much in our thoughts, because I'm also a very anxious person and like, and that comes out for me as like always having to do something. Like I need to stay busy, I need to get things done, right? So I have a hard time like coming down from that and like, okay, I need to be present, I need to do these things. So yeah, from spending time with people. And now like with my kids, like just taking more of that like playtime and sometimes even healing my inner child with them in that play of like, I didn't get to do that, or I remember like I used to love doing this. Like, let's try that.
I'm not very big on expressing how I feel in that moment, but I am very big on music. And I also love music, and that's the way I express myself depending on my music. Recently, a friend of mine, we were in the car and I said, "Oh, can you change the song on Spotify?" And she was looking through all of my recently searched. And she was like, "Oh my God, Samantha, Mientes by Camila. No, sorry, not Camila, Camilo, Juanes, like all this other stuff." And it was kind of like a depressive mood. And she was like, "Are you okay? Like, are you going through stuff?" I'm like, I mean, I'm definitely going through stuff, but it's funny how you're able to like express yourself with music, whether you know it or not, because I honestly, at the time, I didn't realize that all I was listening to was like sad songs until she called me out for it.
On Spotify, they like recommend playlists and stuff. Like
Yeah.
mine literally says moody mix.
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, like thanks for rubbing it in, Spotify. Jeez.
The thing I love about Hispanic music, it's also very like emotional. It's very raw. It's like my God, the emotions that come out of just one song for me are just very healing, and I love it. I think that's the genre I listen to the most. I like all types of music, but Hispanic, oof, tops everything for me.
I'm the same way. I like a mix of a lot of things, but if like mostly my go-to when I'm in my moods and stuff is Spanish music and even different genres within the Spanish music. I've told my husband like, yeah, I'm a romantic and you could tell by like these things. Like, why can't you just understand that you could just play that song for me, right? And things like that. Uh,
Hmm.
but have y'all heard of Carla Morrison since you listen to more of the Spanish music?
I have, yes.
Okay, I'm like, I could connect with her stuff a lot. And again, honoring people, that's how I honor my daughter. Like a lot of her music is like very like um I don't know, like I used to listen to it with her. It was calming for her, but then it was also healing during a lot of the hospital stays. Like we would listen to
Hmm.
her music together. And oddly enough, and I'm still trying to find out how or why she has a song like with my daughter's name. And I'm just like, that was so interesting. And I'm like forever connected to like her.
Oh, I think I've seen the song. I don't think I might recognize it if I hear it, but that's so sweet and honestly very connecting in a way. Like kind of brings you back.
And I love that for us that we're able to connect to it, right? And we're able to find how it's healing for us. And I know you said like for you, it's more of like the Hispanic Spanish music, similar for me, but my brother is like really big on music too. And for him, it's like a lot of R&B. Like he has his favorite artists and things like that. And he's all constantly teaching me and like telling me like, look, did you understand this song? And like telling me about their background, like because he's doing more of like the follow through or following up on like their stories and like trying to understand why they wrote these things. And like you said, that songwriting is part of their healing journey and so important for us to have that resource and access to that.
I love when people recommend me songs. I have a friend who told me his love language is like when you share music. You're able to recommend a song. And my brothers and I, we have similarities in songs, and then again, the complete like opposite taste in music. Recently, my youngest brother was like, "Come with me to a concert. I want to share this experience with you." And even though I don't know the music of this band, I don't know anything about them. The fact that, he wants to take the time to experience that with me makes me so incredibly happy because, you know, not only is that us spending time together, that's him showing his like world to me.
I could totally relate with both of those things. One, like being a lost mom. There is another person that I'm really close to who lost her son, and she became really close to me when my daughter came around and was sick. And then she's always been there after my daughter passed away. And she's constantly sending me songs like this one, these are our babies and whatnot. And we're connecting that way. And it's very healing. And then, too, with my brother and like the whole concert experience, like I like the music too that he listens to, but he loves it, right? And that was like, I love going to concerts with him together as well. And when it's someone that I know he may enjoy, maybe again, not love it, like I love to invite him too, because it's just like that connection. And like you said, being in their world and like being vulnerable with you with this.
I have so much respect for people who made a career out of it and till this day are still playing those instruments because there's so much practice that's required. And so to figure out that that's your passion, it's great. It's kind of like figuring out, oh, you want to be a social worker. That's your passion. Whenever you find out what it is that you want to do, you feel everything is coming together. When I have like a plan or something that has been completed, I feel like, oh, my life has been made. I'm okay. Like, I'm where I need to be. This is great.
Finding your passion, and then when you actually are acting on it and like doing those things and you feel like, no, this is me, I am in the right place, like I made that right decision.
Everything when it comes to the mental health field, everything that I've manifested thus far has happened. And it just makes me feel like this is where I'm meant to be. And I really can't imagine myself doing anything else. So it's a great feeling. It really is. Now, we have one last question for you. Where's your mental health at today? And if it's not in the best place, what have you been doing to, you know, to help yourself?
That's a good question. And it's in, yeah, not the best place. I wouldn't, of course, it's not 100%. I would want to say maybe you do like the scales, right? 0 to 10. I would say maybe like a 6, between a 5 and a 6. Again, because of my experiences, I try to be more in the present moment and be grateful of like, okay, I have this, right? And look at everything I've overcome, look at everything I've went through, and try to remind myself how resilient I am. But at the same time, like because of that, like how am I going to ignore that, I feel a certain way, right? Still, regardless, and I'm struggling. And what I do with it, obviously, continue therapy, and now just even trying to find more ways of like even starting journaling for myself, more ways to better myself, recognize these things and finding the different tools, or what change do I need to make? Because obviously either this wasn't working or this hasn't been working. So being more mindful, acknowledging things for myself.
That takes a lot too. And the fact that you are always trying to find ways to make sure that you're okay and that you can be present for your clients, for your family. It's not easy. It really isn't. I work on that on myself every single day too, because again, I struggle with depression. So it's like I have to always figure out a way to make sure that I'm present for my clients and for my friends and for my family, to know that you're raising your family and then you're doing your private practice. Like I said, that is incredibly admirable.
Thank you.
I think that's it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
And thank
you
you again for being our first guest virtual. This was great.
for having me. It was a lot of fun. And like I said, even like this is our first time even meeting. So I love
Yeah,
we all were able to connect, and it wasn't scary. You made me feel comfortable, and
I'm glad.
I'm glad. And I even made it a point where I was like, I'm not even gonna bother like stalking her or like seeing what population she deals with. I was like, I'm not even gonna do that because I just want to ask her everything on the spot, just so then everything is like natural, you know? And I'm so, so, so glad that this came out so authentic. And I really had such a great time talking to you and to have all these conversations. That even had me thinking like, maybe I should be doing these things too. Um, so, my dear, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for such a wonderful conversation. You are seriously amazing. I admire you, and I hope that we continue to keep in touch even after this because you are amazing.
thank you for having me. And I appreciate both of you, your genuineness, and even doing this because it's just important for everyone, for all of us to like feel seen and know that we're not alone. And everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own story, and we're all important. And yes, let's keep in touch, especially if
Definitely.
y'all start opening your private practices.
Definitely, definitely. All right, everybody. Thank you all for watching. Please like, subscribe, give us a comment, share this with your friends and family. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Follow our TikTok and Instagram, which is therapists_unmasked. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.